Her phone rang once, sharp, cutting through the ballroom noise, and the moment she answered in flawless Italian, the Winter King's head snapped toward her. His men froze, his eyes narrowed, and before she even lowered the phone, he'd already decided something deadly about her. Hours later, after the attack, after the bodies, after watching her whisper to someone on that line, like a coded message, his voice dropped to a chilling command that changed her fate forever. Don't let her leave. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories TV besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Serafina had never intended to be in Milan that night. 3 weeks earlier, she had been living a quiet life in London, working as a translator for a private security firm. Her gift for languages, 7 spoken fluently, 3 more passably, had always been her escape. Growing up in foster care, words became her armor, her ticket out, her proof that she was more than a girl nobody wanted. The Milan assignment came suddenly. Her boss called at midnight, voice tight with urgency. A high-profile client needed a translator for a black tie event. The pay was triple her usual rate. She should have asked more questions. Instead, she packed a bag, boarded a red-eye flight, and found herself standing in the foyer of the Grand Palazzo, wearing a borrowed designer gown that hugged her curves in ways that made her self-conscious. The burgundy silk was meant for someone else, someone who belonged in rooms like this. She did not belong here. She felt it in her bones. The next morning, she met her employer for the first time. Victor Marchetti was Italian old money with new money appetites. His smile was too wide, his eyes too hungry when they swept over her figure. But he paid well, and Serafina had learned long ago to tolerate discomfort for survival. "You speak Korean?" he asked, stirring his espresso without looking at her. "Fluently," she replied. "Also Japanese, Mandarin, Russian, Spanish, French, and Arabic." His eyebrows rose. Impressive for a girl from nowhere. The words stung, but she kept her expression neutral. "Languages don't care where you come from." Victor laughed, a sound like gravel scraping glass. "Tonight, you'll translate for our Korean guests. The Kang Syndicate is sending their heir, Minho." His voice dropped. "They say he's never smiled, not once. They call him the Winter King." Serafina's stomach tightened. She had heard the name before, whispered in dark corners, written in blood-red ink across intelligence reports she was never supposed to see. Kang Min-ho didn't just run the Eastern Syndicate, he was the Eastern Syndicate. That evening, the palazzo transformed into a glittering cage. Crystal dripped from every surface. Champagne flowed like water. Beautiful people with ugly secrets filled every corner, their laughter too loud, their eyes too watchful. Serafina stood near the grand staircase, her earpiece connected to Victor's. Security team, her mind running through Korean honorifics and business terminology. She had dressed carefully, a simple black dress that covered more than it revealed, her natural curls pulled back in a low bun. She wanted to be invisible, but invisibility was never her gift. She felt him before she saw him, a shift in the room's energy, conversations dimming, bodies turning. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and Kang Min-ho walked through. He was tall, taller than she expected, with broad shoulders beneath a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His black hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jaw, straight nose, lips pressed into a line that suggested he had never found anything in this world worth smiling about. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark as midnight, cold as winter. They swept the room with predatory efficiency, cataloging threats, dismissing irrelevancies. And then they found her. Later that night, Serafina would try to understand what had happened in that moment, how time seemed to stutter, how the noise of the ballroom faded to static, how his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that felt almost violent. She looked away first, survival instinct. You did not hold eye contact with apex predators, but she could feel him still watching her, even as Victor appeared at her elbow, gripping her arm too tightly, pulling her forward. Even as introductions were made and she translated pleasantries she did not mean. "Tell him we're honored by his presence," Victor said smoothly. Serafina translated, her Korean crisp and formal. Minho's eyes never left her face, not once. Hangujeo reul jal hashineo, he said quietly. Your Korean is excellent. His voice was deep, textured, like smoke over gravel. It did something to her spine, something dangerous. Gamsa hamnida, she replied. Thank you. His head tilted slightly. A question formed in those dark eyes. Where did you learn? She hesitated. Her Korean had been learned in back alleys and church basements from an elderly woman who had taken her in for one winter when she was 15. It was not a story for ballrooms. Here and there, she said in English. Something flickered in his expression, not quite a smile, but close. The following morning, Serafina woke to chaos. Her phone buzzed with 17 missed calls from Victor's team. She dressed quickly and rushed to the palazzo, finding armed guards at every entrance and Victor pacing the marble foyer like a caged animal. What happened? She demanded. The Kang delegation was attacked last night, after they left the party. Victor's face was pale beneath his tan. 3 of his men are dead, and Minho... He swallowed. Minho is blaming us. Her blood turned to ice. Did we... Of course not, Victor snapped. But he doesn't believe that. He's demanding a meeting. And you... His eyes fixed on her with unnerving intensity. He specifically requested you be present. Me? Why? Victor's smile was thin and humorless. I was hoping you could tell me. A few hours later, Serafina found herself in a private room on the palazzo's upper floor. The windows had been covered. Armed men lined the walls, and Kang Min-ho sat in a leather armchair like a king on a throne, his eyes tracking her every movement as she entered. Leave us, he said in Korean. His men hesitated. Now. The room emptied. Victor tried to protest but was firmly escorted out, and then it was just the 2 of them. Serafina's heart hammered against her ribs. She should have been terrified. She was terrified, but beneath the fear was something else, something that felt like recognition. You were speaking Italian on the phone last night, he said quietly, during the attack. You told someone not to move. Her breath caught. How had he heard that? The chaos, the gunfire, the screaming, and he had noticed her whispered words? I was talking to my contact, she managed. I didn't know what was happening. Your contact. He rose from the chair, moving toward her with predatory grace. And who is your contact? Serafina Cole. The way he said her name, low, deliberate, like he was tasting it, sent shivers down her spine. Someone who was supposed to help me get out if things went wrong, she admitted. I didn't know about the attack, I swear. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker, something that made her dizzy. I believe you, he said. She blinked. You do? I've spent my entire life reading liars. His eyes traced her face slowly, thoroughly, like he was memorizing every detail. You're not lying. You're scared, confused, but not guilty. Then why am I here? His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. Because I can't stop thinking about you. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy as smoke. Serafina's lips parted, but no sound came out. She had prepared herself for interrogation, for threats, for violence. Not for this. That's... She shook her head. You don't even know me. No, he agreed. I don't. And that's what terrifies me. Before she could respond, the door burst open. One of his men rushed in, speaking rapid Korean. Serafina caught fragments. Another attack, the warehouse, explosions. Minho's expression shifted instantly. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by cold, calculated fury. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Don't let her leave, he said to his men. His eyes found hers one last time. I'll be back. And then he was gone. By the end of the week, Serafina had learned 3 things about her captivity. first, it wasn't really captivity. She had a luxurious suite in Minho's Milan estate, complete with a private library, a chef who prepared whatever she requested, and unfailingly polite guards. She could walk the gardens, use the pool, and access the internet. She simply couldn't leave. Second, Minho was fighting a war. The attack at the palazzo had been the opening salvo in a conflict with a rival syndicate, the Benedetti family, who wanted to expand into Asian markets. Every night she heard him return in the early hours, his footsteps heavy in the corridor outside her room. Third, he visited her every evening without fail, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. They talked about languages, about books, about the philosophy of power. He never touched her, never made inappropriate advances. He simply watched her, like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Why are you keeping me here?" she asked one night. He was standing by the window, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight. "Because you're safer here than anywhere else." "Safer from what?" He turned to face her. "The Benedettis know I'm interested in you. That makes you a target." Her heart stuttered. "Interested?" His eyes darkened. "Don't pretend you don't know." The next day, everything changed. Serafina was in the library when Marco Benedetti walked through the door, a man she recognized from intelligence briefings, the heir to the rival family, with slicked back hair and a smile that made her skin crawl. "So, you're the translator everyone's talking about," he said, circling her slowly. "I can see why Minho's obsessed. You're exquisite." She stood her ground. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell wine on his breath. "They say he hasn't touched a woman in 3 years. Then you show up, and suddenly he's keeping you locked in his estate like a princess in a tower." His hand reached for her face. "What's so special about you?" "Don't touch me. I do what I want." His fingers grazed her cheek. The door exploded inward. Minho stood in the frame, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a fury Serafina had never seen. Behind him, guards swarmed in, weapons drawn. "Get your hands off her," Minho said. His voice was quiet, deadly quiet. "Now." Marco smirked but stepped back, hands raised. "Relax, I was just introducing myself." "You broke into my home." Minho advanced slowly, each step deliberate. "You touched what's mine." Serafina's breath caught. "What's mine?" "She's not yours," Marco said. "She's a contractor, a nobody." Minho's fist connected with Marco's jaw so fast that Serafina barely saw it. The Benedetti heir crumpled to the ground, blood streaming from his mouth. "Take him to the basement," Minho ordered his men. "I'll deal with him later." As the guards dragged Marco away, Minho turned to Serafina. His fury melted into something softer. Concern, fear, desperation, all tangled together. "Did he hurt you?" His hands cupped her face, tilting it gently, examining her for injuries. "Serafina, did he hurt you?" "No," she whispered. "I'm fine." He exhaled shakily, pulling her against his chest. His heart pounded beneath her ear, wild and unsteady. "I will burn down anyone who tries to touch you," he said into her hair. "Anyone." Later that night, Serafina couldn't sleep. She wandered the estate, eventually finding Minho in his study, staring at a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. "You shouldn't be up," he said without looking at her. "Neither should you." He finally turned. In the dim lamplight, the sharp planes of his face softened. He looked younger, more vulnerable. "I've spent my whole life building walls," he said quietly, "making sure no one could get close enough to hurt me. And then you walked into that ballroom, speaking Italian like a spy and looking at me like I was human." He shook his head. "I don't know what to do with you. I'm not asking you to do anything." "That's the problem." He stood, moving toward her slowly. "You don't ask for anything. You don't want my money or my power or my name. So what am I supposed to offer you?" She swallowed hard. "Minho, tell me to stop." His voice was rough, strained. "Tell me you don't feel this and I'll leave you alone. I'll send you back to London tomorrow." She should have said the words, should have run. But her heart was pounding and her skin was burning, and when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "I can't." A few days later, the Benedetti retaliation came. Serafina was in the garden when the explosion rocked the east wing. Guards shouted, alarms blared, and suddenly arms were around her, dragging her toward the safe room beneath the estate. But they weren't Minho's men. She fought, screamed, kicked. But there were too many of them, and something sharp pierced her neck, and the world went dark. When she woke, she was in a concrete room with no windows. Her wrists were bound, her head throbbed, and Marco Benedetti was sitting across from her, his jaw still bruised from Minho's punch. "Hello again," he said cheerfully. "We have so much to talk about." The following morning, Minho stood in the ruins of his east wing, his face carved from stone. His men had found nothing, no bodies, no ransom demands, no trail to follow. "Find her," he said quietly. His lieutenant Park Jun-woo shifted nervously. "Sir, we don't even know where to start." "Then burn down every Benedetti property until someone talks." Minho's voice cracked. "Just slightly. Find her, or I will tear this city apart brick by brick." Jun-woo had served Minho for 15 years. He had seen his boss survive assassination attempts without flinching, seen him negotiate with governments, topple empires, and end bloodlines. He had never seen him afraid, until now. "We'll find her," Jun-woo promised, "whatever it takes." By the end of the second day, 3 Benedetti warehouses were ash. 4 of Marco's cousins had been captured, and still no sign of Serafina. Minho hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. He stood in his study staring at the chair where she had sat just days ago, her voice teasing him about his taste in books. "You only read philosophy and war strategy," she had said. "No fiction. Fiction is lies. Fiction is truth wearing a mask." She had smiled then, soft and real. Sometimes the mask makes it easier to see. He had wanted to kiss her in that moment, had wanted to pull her into his arms and never let go, but he had been afraid of wanting something he couldn't control, couldn't protect, couldn't keep. Now she was gone, and the fear was eating him alive. On the 3rd night, they found her. Jun-woo burst into the study with coordinates, blueprints, and a tactical plan. Minho listened to none of it. He simply grabbed his gun and walked out the door. "Sir," Jun-woo scrambled after him. "You can't go alone. It's a trap." "I know." "Then let us—" "She's been in that concrete room for 3 days." Minho's voice was deadly calm. "Alone. Scared. Wondering if anyone's coming for her." He turned and Jun-woo saw something in his eyes that made him step back. "I'm going. Try to stop me." No one did. Later that night, the Benedetti compound erupted in chaos. Minho moved through it like a ghost, silent, lethal, unstoppable. Guards fell before they could raise their weapons. Doors shattered under his kicks. He carved a path through the darkness with single-minded fury. He found her in the basement, bound to a chair, her face bruised, her lips split, but alive, conscious. And when she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "You came," she whispered. He was at her side in an instant, cutting her bonds with shaking hands. "I will always come for you." His voice broke. "Always." Marco appeared in the doorway, gun raised. "Touch her again and I'll—" Minho moved faster than he thought. The gun flew from Marco's hand. His body slammed against the wall, and then Minho's hands were around his throat, squeezing, crushing. "Minho!" Serafina's voice cut through the red haze. "Minho, stop, please." He froze, looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, not of Marco, but of what he might become. He released Marco, who crumpled to the ground, gasping. Then he turned back to Serafina, lifted her into his arms, and carried her out of that place without looking back. The next morning, Serafina woke in a hospital bed. Private room, armed guards outside. And Minho was asleep in the chair beside her, his hand wrapped around hers like he was afraid she might disappear. She studied his face in the pale light, the sharp lines softened by exhaustion, the furrow between his brows that never quite smoothed out. He looked younger when he slept, almost peaceful. Her fingers tightened around his and his eyes opened instantly, alert, searching. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." His thumb traced circles on her wrist. "How do you feel?" "Like I got kidnapped by a Mafia family." She managed a weak smile. "You?" "Like I almost lost you." His voice cracked. "Serafina, Don't." She shook her head. "Don't apologize. This wasn't your fault. You were taken because of me. Because they knew He stopped, swallowed, started again. "They knew you mattered to me. And do I?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Matter to you?" He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her bruised knuckles. "More than anything in this world." A few days later, Serafina was released from the hospital. Minho brought her back to his estate, a new wing far from the damage, and installed her in a suite that rivaled any five-star hotel. "You need to rest," he said firmly. "I've been resting for 3 days. You've been recovering. There's a difference." She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Truth was, she was exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. The kidnapping had stripped away her defenses, left her raw and exposed. And Minho was being impossibly gentle. He brought her meals himself, sat with her while she ate, and read to her when she couldn't sleep. The fierce, cold Mafia boss had vanished, replaced by a man who looked at her like she was precious, irreplaceable. It terrified her, because she was starting to believe it. The following week, Victor Marchetti requested a meeting. Minho refused. Victor insisted. And Serafina, against everyone's advice, agreed to see him. They met in the estate's formal sitting room, with Minho standing guard by the window, his eyes never leaving Victor's face. "I just want to know you're okay," Victor said, his charm dialed up to maximum. "You were my employee, after all." "I'm fine," Serafina said coolly. Good. Victor leaned forward. "You know, there's still a place for you in my organization. This whole mess with the Kang Syndicate, it doesn't have to define your career. You could come back to London, start fresh." Before she could respond, Minho stepped forward. "She's not going anywhere." Victor's smile turned sharp. "I wasn't asking you, and I wasn't giving you a choice." Minho's voice dropped to a dangerous register. "She stays. End of discussion." Serafina's heart clenched. Part of her wanted to argue. She wasn't property, wasn't something to be claimed, but another part, a treacherous part, thrilled at his possessiveness. "I can speak for myself," she said quietly. Both men turned to her. She stood, smoothing her dress. "Victor, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. My life is here now." Victor's face darkened. "Here? With him? You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not." She glanced at Minho, something warm unfurling in her chest at the naked hope in his eyes. "But I'm willing to find out." That evening, after Victor had gone, Serafina found Minho in the garden. He was standing by the fountain, his hands in his pockets, his profile sharp against the setting sun. "You didn't have to do that," he said without turning. "Do what?" "Choose me," in front of him. He finally looked at her, and she saw the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "You could have walked away, gone back to your old life." "I could have." She moved to stand beside him, "but I didn't want to." "Why?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the water dance in the fading light. "Because for the first time in my life, someone came for me. Not because they had to, not because they wanted something, but because they couldn't bear to lose me." She turned to face him fully. "Do you know how long I've waited for that?" His breath caught. "Serafina." "I'm not asking for promises," she continued. "I know what your life is. I know the danger, the enemies, the constant threat. But when I was in that basement, alone and scared, the only thing I could think about was you, your voice, your eyes, the way you say my name like it's something sacred." Her voice trembled. "So yes, I chose you and I'd do it again." He moved so fast she barely saw it coming. One moment they were standing apart, the next she was in his arms, his mouth finding hers with desperate, devastating precision. The kiss was everything. Fire and tenderness, hunger and reverence. She melted into him, her fingers gripping his jacket, her body pressing close to his warmth. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I will spend the rest of my life earning that choice," he whispered. "I swear it." The next few weeks passed in a haze of quiet moments and stolen kisses. Minho was attentive in ways that made Serafina's heart ache, bringing her coffee in the morning, learning her favorite books, memorizing the way she liked her pasta cooked. But the danger hadn't passed. The Benedetti family was regrouping, furious at their humiliation. Intel suggested they were planning something big, a final strike to take down Minho and reclaim their territory. "You should leave Milan," Minho said one night, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder as they sat together on the library sofa. "Go somewhere safe until this is over. And leave you alone to face them? I've been facing enemies alone my entire life. That's exactly my point." She shifted to look at him. "You don't have to be alone anymore." His jaw tightened. "I won't risk you. And I won't abandon you." She cupped his face in her hands. "We do this together, or not at all?" The argument might have continued, but her phone buzzed. An unknown number, Italian area code. She answered cautiously. "Hello? Miss Cole." A voice she didn't recognize. Cold, professional. "We have some information you might find interesting about your employer." "Who is this?" "A friend. Check your email." The line went dead. Later that night, Serafina sat in the dark staring at her laptop screen. The email contained documents, dozens of them, financial records, communications, plans that suggested Victor Marchetti had orchestrated the original attack at the Palazzo, that he had been working with the Benedettis all along, that the entire assignment had been a setup to put Serafina in Minho's path as a distraction. A distraction, she whispered, her stomach churning. "I was just bait." She thought of Victor's smile at that first meeting, his insistence that she attend the party, his feigned concern after the kidnapping. She had been used again, just like always. The old wounds tore open, the foster homes, the broken promises, the people who had claimed to care, only to abandon her when she needed them most. Maybe that was all she was good for. A tool, a stepping stone, a nobody from nowhere. Minho found her crying in the library an hour later. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. He simply gathered her into his arms and held her while she sobbed. "Whatever it is," he murmured against her hair, "we'll face it together." By the end of the week, Minho had confirmed the intel. Victor Marchetti was a traitor. The original attack had been staged to weaken Minho's position and create an opening for the Benedettis. "He played us all," Junwoo said grimly, "used Miss Cole as a pawn." Minho's expression was carved from ice. "Not anymore." The counterattack was swift and surgical. Minho's men dismantled Victor's network piece by piece, seizing assets, exposing secrets, turning allies into enemies. Within days, Victor Marchetti went from powerful broker to hunted man. But Serafina took no pleasure in it. The revelation had shaken something loose inside her, old insecurities bubbling to the surface. "He hired me because I was expendable," she said quietly one evening. "No family, no connections, no one to miss me if I disappeared." "That's not true," Minho's voice was fierce. "I would have searched forever." "You didn't even know me then." "I knew enough." He took her hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "From the moment I saw you in that ballroom, something inside me recognized you. I can't explain it, but I knew. I knew you were meant to be in my life." She wanted to believe him. Desperately, but the fear was a living thing, coiled around her heart. "What if I'm not enough?" she whispered. "What if you wake up one day and realize I'm just ordinary?" He pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. You could never be ordinary, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." A few days later, the final confrontation came. The Benedettis made their move, a coordinated assault on 3 of Minho's key operations, designed to draw his forces thin, while a strike team went for the man himself. But Minho was ready. He'd been preparing for this since the moment Serafina was taken. The battle was brutal, but brief. When the smoke cleared, the Benedetti Empire was in ruins. Marco was in custody, awaiting trial in courts that owed Minho favors. And Victor Marchetti. Victor had tried to flee, only to be captured at the airport with a suitcase full of stolen documents. "What will happen to him?" Serafina asked. Minho's smile was cold. "Justice, the kind he can't buy his way out of." She should have felt satisfaction, relief. Instead, she just felt tired. "It's over," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "No?" He turned her to face him, his expression softening. "It's just beginning." The following morning, Minho asked Serafina to meet him in the garden. She found him standing by the fountain again, but this time his posture was different. Nervous, almost uncertain. "I have something for you," he said. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "Minho, let me finish." He took a breath. "I've never been good with words. I've spent my whole life communicating through action, through power, through fear. But you taught me that there's another language, one I never learned." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the morning light like captured starfire. "I don't want to own you," he continued, his voice rough. "I don't want to cage you or control you or make you something you're not. I just want to spend the rest of my life standing beside you, learning your language, becoming the man you deserve." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I don't need you to be anyone other than who you are." "Is that a yes?" She laughed, a bright, broken sound. "Yes, it's a yes. It's always been yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promises and forever. A few weeks later, they were married in a private ceremony at the estate. Serafina wore ivory silk, her curls loose around her shoulders. Minho wore black, as always, but his eyes were warm when he looked at her. The guest list was small: June Woo, a few trusted associates, and the elderly woman from London who had taught Serafina Korean all those years ago. No fanfare, no spectacle. Just 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds. "I never thought I'd have this," Serafina whispered as they danced their first dance. "A family, a home, someone who chose me." "I will choose you every day," Minho replied, "every hour, every breath." She believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed. The following months brought changes. Minho began transitioning his empire toward legitimate business: real estate, technology, and international trade. It was slow work, dangerous work, but he was determined. "For you," he said when she asked why. "For us, for our future." Serafina continued her translation work, but on her own terms, helping refugees navigate legal systems, teaching languages to at-risk youth, and building bridges between communities. She had finally found a purpose beyond survival. And then, one morning, everything changed again. She stood in the bathroom staring at the test in her trembling hands. 2 lines, unmistakable. Minho found her there 20 minutes later, still frozen in place. "Serafina?" His voice was tight with concern. "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak, just held up the test. He stared at it for a long moment. Then his face transformed, wonder and joy and terror all tangled together. "Is that?" His voice cracked. "Are we?" "Yes," she whispered. "We're going to have a baby." The sound he made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He fell to his knees in front of her, pressing his face to her stomach, his shoulders shaking. "I never thought—" He couldn't finish, just held her, crying openly for the first time in his life. "I never thought I could have this." She ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling freely. Neither did I. 8 months later, on a spring morning in Seoul, they welcomed their daughter into the world. She had her father's dark eyes and her mother's riot of curls. They named her Yuna, meaning grace, mercy, heaven's blessing. Minho held her like she was made of glass, his tough, scarred hands impossibly gentle. "She's perfect," he breathed. "She's ours," Serafina replied, "our fresh start." He looked at her then, his wife, the mother of his child, the woman who had answered a phone call in Italian and changed his life forever. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not leaving. For staying when you had every reason to run." He kissed her forehead, then their daughter's. "For choosing me." Serafina smiled, leaning into his embrace. "You made it easy." Outside the window, Seoul sparkled in the morning light. A new city, a new beginning, a future neither of them had dared to imagine, but they had found it anyway. In the chaos of that Venetian ballroom, in the whisper of Italian through gunfire, in the moment when two strangers locked eyes and something impossible awakened between them. Love, it turned out, didn't care about syndicates or borders or the weight of the past. It simply was. Relentless, transformative, eternal. And as Kang Min-ho held his family close, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and rose, he finally understood what his translator wife had been trying to tell him all along. Fiction wasn't lies. Fiction was truth wearing a mask, and their story, the impossible, dangerous, beautiful story of how they found each other, was the truest thing he had ever known. The first year of Yuna's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming joy. Minho, who had commanded armies and toppled empires, was brought to his knees by a 6-pound infant with his eyes and her mother's stubborn spirit. "She won't stop crying," he said desperately one night, pacing the nursery with Yuna wailing against his chest. "I've tried everything, feeding, changing, rocking, singing." "You sang to her?" Serafina couldn't hide her smile. "Badly, very badly." He looked genuinely distressed. "What if she hates me?" Serafina took the baby from his arms and settled into the rocking chair. Within minutes, Yuna's cries softened to whimpers, then silence. "She doesn't hate you," Serafina said gently. "She just needed her mother." "She always needs her mother." Minho slumped into the chair beside her. "I'm useless." "You're not useless, you're learning." She reached over, squeezing his hand. "We both are." A few weeks later, Minho proved just how much he had learned. Serafina came down with a vicious flu, barely able to lift her head from the pillow. She expected chaos. Minho calling doctors, hiring emergency nannies, panicking in that controlled way of his. Instead, she woke to silence. She found him in the kitchen, Yuna strapped to his chest in a carrier, expertly preparing soup with one hand while consulting his phone with the other. "What are you doing?" she croaked from the doorway. "Making your grandmother's chicken soup recipe. Well, the internet's version." He looked up, his expression soft with concern. "Go back to bed. I have everything under control." "You're wearing our daughter like an accessory. She likes it, stops crying immediately." He turned back to the stove, stirring with practiced ease. "Now go rest. Doctor's orders." "You're not a doctor." "I own 3 hospitals. Close enough." She laughed despite her aching throat. "When did you become domestic?" He glanced over his shoulder, something warm flickering in his dark eyes. "When I finally had something worth coming home to." By the end of Yuna's first year, the transformation of Minho's empire was nearly complete. The last of the shadowy operations had been shuttered or sold. The Kang name, once whispered with fear, was now associated with innovation, philanthropy, and legitimate power. It wasn't easy. Old enemies tested the new boundaries. Former allies felt betrayed by the shift. There were threats, assassination attempts, moments when Serafina wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. But Minho never wavered. "This is for her," he said one night, watching Yuna sleep in her crib. "For you. I won't raise my daughter in shadows. I won't teach her that power only comes from fear. What will you teach her instead?" He was quiet for a moment. "That strength can be gentle. That love is worth more than territory. That her father—" His voice caught. That her father tried to be better. For her. Serafina wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her cheek to his back. "You're already better. You've been better since the moment you let yourself feel." The following spring brought unexpected visitors. Junwoo appeared at breakfast one morning with an unusual expression, somewhere between amusement and concern. "Sir, there's someone at the gate, demanding to see Mrs. Kang." Serafina looked up from feeding Yuna. "Who?" "She says she's your sister." The words didn't compute. Serafina had grown up alone, abandoned at birth, shuffled through foster homes like unwanted furniture. She had no family, no roots, no past. "That's impossible," she said flatly. "I don't have a sister." "She has documents, photos, a letter from a woman named Margaret Cole." Serafina's blood turned to ice. Margaret Cole. The name on her original birth certificate. The woman who had given her up 30 years ago without explanation. Minho's hand found hers under the table. Steady, grounding. "Let her in," he said. Later that morning, Serafina sat across from a stranger who wore her own face. Not exactly, of course. Naomi Cole was taller, leaner, with straightened hair and sharp cheekbones. But the eyes were the same. Dark brown, flecked with gold, holding decades of questions. "I didn't know you existed until 6 months ago," Naomi said, her voice carefully controlled. "Mom, our mother, she kept you secret. Gave you up before I was born, made our grandmother promise never to tell." "Why?" "She was 17, alone, terrified." Naomi's composure cracked slightly. "She thought she was protecting you, giving you a better life." "A better life?" The bitterness erupted before Serafina could stop it. "I grew up in foster care, alone, unwanted, while I grew up with a mother who drank herself to death by 40 and a grandmother who blamed me for existing." Naomi's eyes glittered with unshed tears. "Neither of us got the better life, Serafina. We just got different versions of hard." The silence stretched between them. Two sisters, two strangers, two women shaped by absence. Finally, Minho spoke. "Would you like to stay for lunch?" A few days later, Serafina made a decision. "I want to know her," she told Minho that night, curled against him in bed. "Naomi, I want to try." "Then try." His lips brushed her forehead. "I'll support whatever you need." What if she's lying? What if this is some elaborate scheme to... Then we'll deal with it. His arms tightened around her. "But I don't think she's lying. I think she's just as lost as you were, looking for connection." "When did you get so wise?" "I married a translator. She taught me to read between the lines." Serafina smiled against his chest. "She sounds remarkable." "She is." His voice dropped, husky and warm. "Absolutely remarkable." The following months were complicated. Serafina and Naomi circled each other carefully, meeting for coffee, exchanging childhood stories, navigating the minefield of shared trauma and separate wounds. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, misunderstandings, moments when the weight of lost years felt insurmountable. But slowly, tentatively, something began to grow. Not quite sisterhood, not yet, but the possibility of it. And through it all, Minho remained her anchor. Patient when she needed patience, fierce when she needed protection, present in ways that still surprised her after everything they'd been through. "He really loves you," Naomi observed one afternoon, watching Minho play with Yuna across the garden. "I've never seen anything like it." "He nearly burned down Milan to find me," Serafina said quietly. "When the Benedettis took me." "He what?" "Long story." She smiled. "Very long story." By the end of their second year in Seoul, life had settled into something almost normal. Min-ho ran his legitimate empire with the same precision he'd once applied to darker enterprises. Serafina split her time between motherhood and her foundation, teaching languages to immigrant children across the city. And Yuna was walking, talking, demolishing everything in her path with cheerful determination. "She's definitely your daughter," Serafina said one evening, watching Min-ho chase their toddler through the penthouse. "Stubborn, relentless, impossible to reason with." "She gets that from you," he called back, scooping Yuna up and swinging her in a circle until she shrieked with laughter. "I'm perfectly reasonable. You once argued with a street vendor in Naples for 45 minutes about the proper way to make carbonara. I was right. You were terrifying." He deposited Yuna in her playpen and crossed to Serafina, pulling her against him, magnificently, beautifully terrifying. She tilted her face up for a kiss. Sweet talker. "Only for you." The next morning, Serafina received a call that changed everything. Victor Marchetti was dead, killed in prison by an unknown assailant. The investigation was ongoing, but early reports suggested it was an inside job, someone he'd betrayed finally collecting their due. She waited for relief, satisfaction, closure. Instead, she felt nothing, just emptiness. "I thought I'd be happy," she admitted to Min-ho that night. "He used me, tried to destroy you, nearly got me killed. But he's dead, and I'm still here, with you, with Yuna, with everything I never thought I'd have." She shook her head. "Hating him feels like giving him too much power. Even now." Min-ho was quiet for a long moment. "You know what I've learned? Revenge is a prison. You think you're punishing your enemy, but really, you're just locking yourself inside with them." "When did you learn that?" "When I realized I'd rather spend my energy loving you than hating anyone else." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Victor Marchetti is gone. He doesn't get to take up space in our life anymore." She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. "I love you. I know. Arrogant. Always." But his smile was soft and his arms were warm, and she knew that she was home. A few weeks later, Min-ho surprised her with a trip. "Pack a bag," he said over breakfast. "We leave tomorrow." "Leave? For where?" "Venice." Her heart stuttered. Venice, where it all began. "Why?" "Because I want to take you back to where I first saw you." His dark eyes held hers, intense and vulnerable. "I want to stand in that ballroom and remember the moment my life changed, with you, together." "Min-ho, 3 years ago I was the Winter King, cold, empty, convinced that power was the only thing worth having." Reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then you walked in, speaking Italian like music, and everything I thought I knew turned to ash." "I was terrified of you," she admitted. "I know, but you didn't run. You looked me in the eyes and held your ground." His thumb traced circles on her wrist. "Do you know how rare that is? How precious?" She blinked back tears. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." "You always have somewhere to go now." He lifted her hand to his lips. "You have me." Later that week, they returned to the Grand Palazzo. It had been renovated since the attack, new chandeliers, fresh paint, all traces of violence erased. But standing in the ballroom, Serafina could still feel the echoes of that night, the gunfire, the chaos, the moment when obsidian eyes found hers across the crowd. "Right here," Min-ho said quietly, guiding her to the spot by the marble pillar. "This is where you were standing. Phone in your hand, speaking Italian to someone I was already jealous of." "You were jealous?" "Insanely. I didn't even know your name yet, and I wanted to destroy anyone who had your attention." She laughed, shaking her head. "That's terrifying." "I know. I'm better now." "Are you?" He considered the question seriously. "I'm trying to be. Every day." His hand settled on her waist, pulling her close. "You make me want to be better, Serafina. You always have." She rose on her tiptoes, pressing her lips to his. "You are better. You're the best man I know." That's a low bar. It really isn't. That evening, they had dinner on the palazzo's private terrace, overlooking the Venetian canals. Candlelight danced across Minho's features as he watched her with that same intense focus that had once frightened her. Now it just made her feel cherished. "I have something else for you," he said, producing a small jewelry box. "Another ring?" "Different." He opened it to reveal a delicate bracelet, gold links interspersed with tiny charms, a book for her love of literature, a tiny aeroplane for the journey that brought her to him, a small figure of a child for Yuna, and in the center, a single diamond that matched her engagement ring. "It's our story," he explained, "everything that matters. I'll add more charms as we go, new chapters." Her vision blurred with tears. "It's beautiful." "You're beautiful." He clasped it around her wrist. "You're the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me." The following morning, they visited the church where the elderly Korean woman, Mrs. Park, had first taught Serafina the language that would eventually bring her to Minho. The building was small, weathered by centuries of Venetian winters, but the door was unlocked, and inside, candles flickered before ancient icons. "This is where it started," Serafina said softly. "I was 15, homeless, terrified. She found me sleeping in the back pew, and instead of calling the police, she brought me soup." "And taught you Korean?" "She said everyone deserves a secret language. Something just for them." Serafina traced a finger along the worn wooden pew. "I didn't understand what she meant until I used it with you. That first night at the palazzo." "I remember." His voice was low. "You spoke so formally, so precisely, like you'd learned from textbooks." "I learned from a grandmother who missed her home." She looked up at him. "She died 2 years before I came to Milan. I never got to tell her thank you. For the soup, for the language, for making me feel human when everyone else had given up on me." Minho pulled her into his arms. "Then tell her now. I'll wait." Later that day, they walked along the canals, hand in hand. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of rose and gold. Gondoliers sang in the distance. Church bells chimed the hour. It was, Serafina thought, impossibly romantic. Like something from a movie she would have rolled her eyes 3 years ago. Now she understood. Romance wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up. Choosing someone over and over through danger and fear in ordinary days. "What are you thinking?" Minho asked. "That I'm happy." She squeezed his hand. Genuinely, terrifyingly happy. Terrifying. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for the other shoe to drop." She shook her head. "Old habits." "I'll catch you if it drops," he said simply. "I'll always catch you." She believed him. After everything, she finally believed him. A few days later, they returned to Seoul. Yuna launched herself at them the moment they walked through the door, babbling excitedly about everything she'd done with her Aunt Naomi and Uncle Jun-woo. "She said her first full sentence," Naomi reported, looking exhausted but pleased. "Told the dog to sit." "We don't have a dog," Serafina said. "You do now." Jun-woo emerged from the kitchen, a tiny puppy cradled in his arms. She was very insistent. Minho stared at his lieutenant, his feared, respected lieutenant, holding a fluffy golden creature no bigger than a football. "Jun-woo!" "She cried, sir." Jun-woo's ears were red. "For 2 hours. What was I supposed to do?" Serafina burst out laughing. "Welcome to parenthood." The next few months were a whirlwind. The puppy, named Biscuit by Yuna's incomprehensible decree, destroyed 3 pairs of Minho's expensive shoes and stole everyone's hearts. Naomi became a permanent fixture in their lives, moving to Seoul to be closer to her newfound family. And Yuna continued her campaign of cheerful destruction, growing more like both her parents every day. "She argued with me today," Minho said one evening, collapsing onto the sofa. "Actually argued, with logic and everything." "She's 2. Exactly. She's 2 and she's already winning debates. He looked genuinely bewildered. How is this possible? She's your daughter, Serafina reminded him. You keep saying that like it explains things. Because it does. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. I'm persistent. There's a difference. Is there? He pulled her down onto the sofa beside him, tucking her against his side. I persisted in pursuing you. Stubbornly. It worked out. You kidnapped me. Protective custody. You literally said, don't let her leave. Best decision I ever made. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Admit it. She snuggled closer, smiling against his chest. Fine. Best decision you ever made. By the end of their 3rd year together, Serafina had started working on a project close to her heart, a language school for refugee children. Minho provided the funding and the building. Naomi handled the administration, and Serafina taught, patiently helping young minds discover the power of words. You're changing their lives, Minho said one evening, watching her grade papers at the kitchen table. Language changed mine. She looked up. It's the least I can do. It's not the least, it's everything. He settled across from her, his expression serious. I've spent most of my life taking territory, taking power, taking whatever I wanted without asking. But you give, constantly, without expectation. That's what love is. Is it? The healthy kind, anyway. She reached across the table, taking his hand. The kind we're teaching Yuna. A few weeks later, the peace was shattered. Serafina was at the language school when her phone buzzed with an alert, then another, then a flood of messages that made her blood run cold. Explosion at Kang Enterprises, multiple casualties, Minho missing. She didn't remember the drive to the office building, didn't remember pushing through the police barricade or screaming Minho's name until her throat was raw. She only remembered Jun Woo's face, pale, streaked with blood and soot, but alive. Where is he? She demanded. The basement. He's trapped. Jun Woo's voice cracked. They're trying to get him out, but the structure is unstable. She pushed past him before he could finish, ran toward the building despite the shouting, the hands trying to hold her back, the rational voice in her head screaming that she was being foolish. She didn't care. She couldn't lose him. Not now. Not ever. Later that night, Minho emerged from the rubble. His suit was destroyed. His face was cut. His left arm hung at an angle that made Serafina's stomach turn. But he was alive, walking, searching the crowd with frantic eyes until they found hers. Serafina. He stumbled toward her, catching himself, reaching for her with his good arm. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. I don't care. She threw herself against him, careful of his injuries but desperate to feel his heartbeat. I thought I lost you. I saw the news and I thought, I'm here. His voice was hoarse, his grip painful, but she didn't care. I'm not going anywhere. What happened? His jaw tightened. Someone sent a message, a very explosive message. Who? I don't know yet. His dark eyes blazed with cold fury, but I'm going to find out. The following week was chaos. Investigations, interrogations, a city on edge and an empire scrambling to respond. The bomb had been planted by a faction of the old Benedetti network, loyalists who had escaped Minho's purge and spent 2 years planning their revenge. They'd been patient, methodical, and they would have succeeded if Minho hadn't insisted on clearing the building for a last-minute safety drill. 13 people were injured, none killed. A miracle, according to the police. Minho knew it wasn't a miracle. It was paranoia, years of survival instinct that even legitimate life couldn't erase. They'll try again, he said grimly. They won't stop until they succeed. Then we stop them first. Serafina's voice was steel, whatever it takes. He looked at her, his wife, his partner, the mother of his child, and saw something he'd never expected. Not fear, no hesitation, determination. Together? He asked. Always. A few days later, they had names, locations, a plan. Minho's network mobilized with terrifying efficiency. Former enemies became temporary allies. Favors were called in across 3 continents, and piece by piece the Benedetti remnants were dismantled. This time, there would be no survivors to seek revenge. "Is it done?" Serafina asked when Minho returned one night, exhausted but finally at peace. "It's done." He pulled her close. "We're safe. Truly safe." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He pressed his forehead to hers. No more ghosts, no more threats, just us. She exhaled slowly, releasing tension she'd been carrying for years. "I never thought I'd have this. Safety, security, someone who would fight for me. You have all of it." His voice was fierce. "You'll always have all of it." The next morning, Serafina discovered she was pregnant again. She sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the test, her mind spinning through 1,000 emotions at once. Joy, terror, wonder, love. Minho found her there an hour later, just like before. "Another one?" he asked softly, settling beside her on the cold tile. "Another one." His hand found hers, intertwining their fingers. "How do you feel?" "Scared, happy, overwhelmed." She laughed shakily. "All of it." "Me too." He pulled her against him, his lips brushing her temple. "But mostly happy, impossibly, ridiculously happy." "Yeah? Yeah." He rested his hand on her still flat stomach. "I never thought I'd have one child. Now we'll have 2, a family, a real family." "You deserve it," she whispered. "You deserve all of it." "So do you." He tilted her chin up, meeting her eyes. "More than anyone I've ever known." The following months passed in a blur of prenatal appointments and nursery preparations. Yuna was thrilled about becoming a big sister, informing everyone she met, including strangers on the street, that her baby was coming, soon. "Her baby," Minho repeated one evening, watching Yuna lecture Biscuit on proper sibling behavior. "She already thinks the baby belongs to her." "She's not wrong," Serafina said. "This whole family belongs to each other." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her growing belly. "When did you become so wise?" "I married a man who taught me that family isn't blood, it's a choice." She ran her fingers through his hair. "Every day, over and over, choosing each other." "And I'll keep choosing you," he murmured against her skin, "for the rest of my life." 8 months later, they welcomed their son. He arrived on a spring morning, red-faced and furious, with his mother's curls and his father's scowl. They named him Jun Seo, meaning talented and auspicious. "He's perfect," Minho breathed, cradling the tiny bundle like precious cargo. "He looks angry," Yuna observed from her perch on the hospital bed. "He just met the world," Serafina said. "Give him time." "Will he like me?" "He'll love you." Minho adjusted his grip, bringing the baby closer to his daughter. "You're his big sister. You'll protect him and teach him and drive him crazy." "Like you do with Mommy?" Serafina burst out laughing. "Exactly like that." A few weeks later, life settled into a new rhythm. 2 children, a husband who still looked at her like she was his entire world, a sister who had become a best friend, a home filled with laughter and chaos and love. It wasn't the life Serafina had imagined for herself. Growing up, she had dreamed of small things, stability, safety, someone who would stay. She had gotten so much more. On their 4th anniversary, Minho took her back to Venice. They stood in the Grand Palazzo ballroom again, older now, changed by everything they'd survived. But when his eyes found hers across the empty room, she felt that same electric jolt, recognition, connection, home. "I have something for you," he said. "Another charm for my bracelet? Something bigger." He guided her to the window where the Venetian skyline glittered in the twilight. "Look." She followed his gaze to a building across the canal, a beautiful old structure newly renovated with a sign she couldn't quite read from this distance. "What am I looking at?" "Your new language school." His voice was soft with emotion. The Serafina Cole Institute for Linguistic Excellence, fully funded, ready to open next month. Her breath caught. Min-ho, you changed my life with words, he said. Now you can change the world. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. How did I get so lucky? You're not lucky. He cupped her face in his hands. You're brave. You survived things that would have broken anyone else. You walked into a ballroom full of monsters and held your ground. You looked at the Winter King and saw a man worth loving. His thumb brushed away her tears. Luck had nothing to do with it. You earned this. All of it. Later that night, they danced on the Palazzo Terrace under a canopy of stars. No music, no audience. Just the two of them, swaying slowly, holding each other like the rest of the world had ceased to exist. Do you remember what I told you? Min-ho murmured. That first night I brought you here? You told me not to leave. I meant it, every word. He pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. I knew, Serafina. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were going to change everything. I just didn't know how much. And now? Now I can't imagine my life without you. His voice dropped, raw with emotion. You're my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, the keeper of every secret I've ever been afraid to tell. I feel the same, she whispered, about all of it. Then stay. He pressed his forehead to hers. Stay with me forever. I already am. She smiled through her tears. Don't you know that by now? 5 years later, on a perfect autumn evening in Seoul, the Kang family gathered for dinner. Min-ho sat at the head of the table, surveying his kingdom with quiet satisfaction. Serafina, beside him, was radiant as ever. Yuna, now 7, is holding court over her 3 younger siblings with cheerful authority. Junseo, almost 5, is arguing passionately about something incomprehensible. And the twins, Mi-young and Ji-hoon, are creating cheerful chaos in their high chairs. 4 children, Jun-woo muttered, shaking his head. I remember when you said you'd never have any. I said a lot of things, Min-ho replied. I was wrong about most of them. Across the table, Serafina caught his eye and smiled. That smile still hit him like a punch to the chest, every single time. I love you, she mouthed. I know, he mouthed back. She rolled her eyes. He grinned. After dinner, when the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Min-ho found Serafina in her favorite spot, the window seat overlooking the garden. Thinking? He asked, settling beside her. Remembering. She leaned into him. That night in Venice, the gunfire, the terror, the moment I looked up and saw you. Best moment of my life. You looked so cold, so dangerous. I was trying to figure out who you were. He laughed softly. This beautiful woman, calm in chaos, speaking Italian like she belonged in a spy movie. I was terrified. You didn't show it. I was good at hiding. She turned to face him. You taught me I didn't have to anymore. He kissed her then, slow, deep, full of everything words couldn't capture. Love, gratitude, promise? Thank you, he whispered against her lips. For what? For answering that call, for speaking Italian, for not running when you should have. He pulled back, his dark eyes shining. For choosing me, every day, over and over. It was never a choice, she said simply. It was fate. And it was. Fate, destiny, the universe conspiring. Whatever name you gave it, the truth remained. 2 strangers had locked eyes across a chaotic ballroom, and something impossible had awakened between them. Not just attraction, not just desire, recognition. Like 2 souls finally finding each other after lifetimes of searching. Serafina Cole, the foster kid from nowhere, had found her home in the arms of the Winter King, and Kang Min-ho, the man who had never smiled, had learned to laugh again. Their story wasn't perfect. It was messy and dangerous and full of moments that almost broke them, but they survived, grew, built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts, a family, a future, a love that conquered fear. And as they sat together in the quiet darkness, watching the stars wheel overhead, they both knew the same truth. This was only the beginning.